about 4.8 seconds. Anybody timing me? All right, welcome everybody. I think we'll 9:30, we will call the meeting to order. Give certification of quorum.
Yes, Chair White, we have more than 50% of the members present.
And as you know, we're going to be starting off with our Source Protection Authority meeting and then moving into our regular board meeting. So I'm going to do my chair's remarks here. That's all right. Couple of items. The GRCA received site plan approval for the new Guelph Lake Nature Center on September 20, and staff are working with staff to obtain the building permit, which is fantastic news. It's been a long time coming. Conservation Ontario meets September 25th. The agenda highlights include the 2024 budget and coordinated submissions on ERO postings affecting conservation authorities. I'll be at that meeting and we'll have a few folks there, so be good to see. A reconciliation walk has been organized by the True North Aid to be held at the Laurel Creek Nature Center on September 30th, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. The event is free and open to members of the public, and information about parking and registration will be sent out by email after the meeting if anyone is interested in attending. So I'm moving along to the agenda. I have a motion that the agenda for the Source Protection Authority meeting be approved as circulated. Moved by John, seconded by Bruce. Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Let me get I need a different view here. I want the, how am I doing that? Click on, push on that. Just a minute. I'm trying to bring up the gallery.
You want full screen, Chair White?
Well, I'm trying to remove your picture is really what I'm trying to do here. No, there it is. I got everybody. Thank you. That's it. All right. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Hearing and seeing none, I'm looking for an approval of the minutes, that the minutes of the Source Protection Authority meeting of May 26, 2023 be approved as circulated. Moved by Natasha, seconded by Brian. Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Any business arising? No delegation. Boom, 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 boom. Reports. Okay. I have a motion that the Grand River Source Protection Authority approve the proposed amendments to the Source Protection Committee rules of procedure. I'll put it on the floor, see if there's any questions. Moved by John, seconded by Colleen. Any comments or questions on this? I know I keep going back and forth between any opposed or all in favor. I'm sorry, I just get muddled. So I'm just going to do with all in favor. We'll stick to that till I change it again. So all in favor? That's carried. Thanks. And then Source Protection Committee appointments. So I have a motion that the Grand River Source Protection Authority appoint Jeff Morzo to the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Committee for a 4-year term as municipal representative for the region of Waterloo, that the Grand River Source Protection Authority appoint Ian McDonald to the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Committee for a 4-year term as an economic representative for business and industry, that the Grand River Source Protection Authority appoint Linda Dixon and Chris Garretts to the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Committee for a 4-year term as public interest representatives. And that the Grand River Source Protection Authority extend the appointment of Alan Dale as a public interest representative to the Lake Erie Region Source Protection Committee for the year expiring November 2024. Moved by Gord, seconded by Sue. Comments, questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And that I motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Brian, seconded by Jerry. All in favor? That meeting is over. Thank you. Okay, moving right along, we're going to move into our general membership meeting. Call it to order, reconfirm quorum, which.
Confirmed, more than 50% of the members still present.
Thank you. All right, so moving right to the agenda, that the agenda for the general membership meeting be approved as circulated. Moved by Pam, seconded by Rob. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Hearing and seeing none. Minutes of the previous, that the minutes of the general membership meeting of August 25th, 23 be approved as circulated. Moved by Pam, seconded by Sue. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Business arising. So we're moving on to delegations. So we have a couple of delegations this morning, which will be on here virtually. They each get 10 minutes and we'll move on from there. And just so the board is aware, we have a report on the delegations at the end of the agenda. So if you've got questions and stuff, so we're going to receive the delegations and then we're going to give our presentation with the report and then we'll throw the floor open for comments and questions if that's okay. So I'm going to turn this technically over. First delegation, if I've got them in the right order, are they there? So the first delegation is Dr. Hugh Whiteley, Niska Land Holdings, 2023 Draft Management Plan. Dr. Whiteley also submitted written correspondence in support of his presentation, which was distributed to the board yesterday as an addendum to the agenda. All right, so we will first welcome Dr. Whiteley, and I will turn the floor over to them and you'll monitor the 10 minutes and away we go. All right, thanks.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
I think so. Welcome, Dr. Whiteley.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the opportunity to make some comments about a very important issue, which is the supply of blue and green spaces to urban dwellers in increasing density municipalities, which the city of Guelph and the GRC have been pursuing very perceptively for the last 50 years. The attention paid to the Niska lands begins at the city of Guelph about 60 years ago in considering the annexation of land from Puslinch. It was decided by the city that they would expand the annexed area to include the Niska lands in order to take planning responsibility for the future use of these lands. In keeping with that intent, the city asked the GRCA to do a preliminary report on the Hanlon Creek Basin development. And the consulting engineer who worked on it, R.J. Boxwell, took a very unusually perceptive approach and recommended that a very large section of the Hanlon Creek Basin, the Valley lands, conserved as an open space area to provide contact with nature to the urban dwellers. And in particular, he identified that the Courtright Waterfowl Park area needed to be in transition to a more general zoological park in order to provide facility for the excellent opportunities for recreation and appreciation of nature it offered. The city administrator, Fred Woods, took up this initiative that Boxwell had originated and generalized it with a statement that identifies in 1970 the need for frequent return to a more natural environment being threatened by increasing density of urban development, and recommending that lands be preserved and conserved to serve the function of contact with nature, and that decision would be appreciated by future generations. To implement that very practical intended outcome, the City Council requested the GRCA in January 1970 to become partners in a conservation project for the Hanlon Creek watershed to establish this very large natural area. They, in the request to the GRCA, they particularly identified the location of the Ontario Waterfowl Research Foundation as requiring special attention, and agreed that the city of Guelph would share the cost of establishing the Hanlon Creek Conservation Area to the extent of 40% of the benefiting costs, as was the existing provincial formula at the time. In response, in January 1970, the GRCA Annual General Meeting, resolution number 1770, agreed that the development of the Hanlon Creek watershed will be adopted as a project of the authority, and that all member municipalities will be designated as benefiting, with the city of Guelph being named as the main benefiting municipality. Planning for the use of the large area that would be set aside as the Hanlon area began with a 1975 planning study that was asked for by the city of Guelph and accomplished by the GRCA. And that interim planning study has this very important message about the Courtright Waterfall Park. This is a few months before the Ontario Waterfall Research Foundation announced that it would no longer be able to fund the operation of that park. So in January 1975, a few months before that, the interim planning study had the following to say: the future of Courtright Waterfall Park is of a major concern to the Conservation Authority at this time. Located at the confluence of Hanlon Creek and the Speed River, its function is very important with regard to other activities planned for the watershed. The objectives of Courtright Park and the research facility located there are admirable in their own right. Actual physical facilities, as well as the actual situation of the Waterfall Foundation, be desired. There is no value of such a facility to the municipality in terms of both education and recreation. Except for the water resources in the area, it cannot be stated that it is an ideal habitat for waterfowl propagation. In terms of ideal habitat, the area is poor or fair at best. Recognizing these facts, this is very important. It is proposed that the area new concept for its use and management. It's just one of a zoological park. The natural features of the area range from cedar swamps to cultivated upland fields. Notice that the cultivated upland fields are considered an important part of the natural features. Due to this variety in landscape and vegetation, it is quite conceivable to establish and maintain an area that would function with a greater variety of species than now exist. That statement was incorporated into a master plan for the Hanlon Creek Conservation Area, originally issued in 1978 and repeated with revisions in 1982, and forms a management plan for the Nisga'a lands that was submitted to the province for funding in 1978. So there is this management plan approved by the city and the GI for the Nisga'a lands that would see the area developed as a wildlife nature reserve for public education and contact with nature. The history of the remaining decisions are that in 1975, the Ontario Waterfowl Research Foundation gave up operation. The city immediately required GRCA to form a Courtright committee to examine what should be done about this potential loss of facility. The GRCA agreed to serve on it. The committee recommended that the the authority undertake consideration of acquiring the property in order to fulfill the management plan that existed for it. And,
Dr. Whiteley, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but just so you're aware, we've got about a minute to go, just so you can.
okay,
Thank you.
they, this led to the acquisition of the land in 1977. The requirements before the board today are to make sure that in assessing the legitimate requirement to find if there are any properties that are surplus to needs, to establish the process that leads to that decision on planning principles. What's needed is that, first of all, the statement of purchase for the Niska lands has to be corrected. It was not to further the purpose of the Hespeler Reservoir project. It was to establish a nature reserve on the Niska lands that the land was purchased. The recommendations 1 and 2 that you have in the draft report should be rephrased to recognize that there is an existing management plan for it, and that management plan is still as valid or more valid today than it was when it was instituted. And any recommendation about surplus land needs to be delayed until a proper examination of the proper purposes for which the land was intended is completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whiteley. Appreciate it. Okay, our second delegation is Laura Muir with regards to the same item, Liska Land Holdings, if she's available. Sorry. Laura, could you unmute, please?
I'm unmuted now, am I?
There you are. Yeah, we got you. I don't.
Okay.
Well, where is she? I don't see her.
Um,
All right, welcome. I'll turn the floor over to you. You have.
okay,
minutes.
I tried to turn the camera on, but
Please.
oh, sorry. I'm unmuted now, am
There you
I?
are. Yeah, we got you. I don't.
Okay,
Well, where is she? I don't see.
I'm here.
You,
Can you hear me?
yeah, I think, is that good? Was the echo gone? All right, yep. I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Laura. You have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the chair and board members. As someone who has lived in the area of the Niska lands for over 30 years and enjoyed the peacefulness of nature, I hold this land close to my heart. I discovered during the Niska ODA process that many community members feel the same way. The protection of these lands as a whole, without housing development, supports the hopes and visions of 60 years of wildlife conservation, first recognized by Horace Mack when he purchased the lands in 1948. In its former life, the Courtright Waterfowl Park was a world-class facility that had 45,000 visitors a year from all over the world. The park visitors commented on how important the natural surroundings were to the success of their visit. The draft management plan does not include the historic public interest in protecting Niska, and so does not honor the vision, hopes, and dreams of people past and present who recognize the value in protecting, restoring, and remediating this land for ours and future generations of people and wildlife. Therefore, the lack of vision in this draft management plan makes it unacceptable. As we learned during COVID, the return to nature-based recreation has a very important benefit to people's health. The city of Guelph has identified a deficiency of future park space. The GRCA already has a problem with the overuse of some conservation areas, leading to a limitation of visitors. Both the city of Guelph and the GRCA have identified that more recreational land may have to be purchased in order to accommodate population increases. With this expected population increase combined with the government mandated increase in urban density, how can there be any surplus conservation land? It is simply not wise to declare land surplus that were originally purchased with money from the public purse in order to provide contact with nature. This purchase was made with $1970 and at much lower land prices. The draft management plan is short-sighted because it does not consider the economic value of retaining already purchased plans for the present and future benefit of public park needs. Therefore, it is my belief that the City of Guelph rezoning of the 8 hectares of Niska lands, formerly Zone P1 parkland, was premature, as this rezoning is not justified until the release of a proper management plan. Urbanization is widely believed to be an increasing threat to biodiversity. This land is diverse. The draft management plan recognizes the value of the land's various ecological components, but makes no attempt to view the land ecologically as a diverse area that supports many species. It needs to be looked at as a whole. Birds, deer, amphibians, snakes, bats, and other species use different portions of the land at different times of the year for breeding and feeding. There are 161 species of birds in this area. This is not recognized in the report. The area of the agricultural field are used by overwintering waterfowl in the Speed and the river. And the deer. I question why the management plan does not consider the value of restoring the agricultural lands for wildlife. After all, the GRCA has converted agricultural fields in other areas into grassland and meadow habitat in order to complement other areas to grassland and meadow habitat in order to complement the adjacent river, the Hanley Creek forests and wetlands. The conversion of the fields to forest and meadow grassland habitat supports the City of Guelph's designation as a bird-friendly city. Restoration would support the protection of grassland species, bird species, and insectivore birds, which from 1970 to 2016 has had a 57% loss of population, or 300 million birds. Birds that depend on grasslands for breeding and wintering have suffered a decline of 87%. This is from the Government of Canada. Moving on, I would like to comment on watershed planning and the protection of groundwater recharge. The Niska Road EA identified an area of significant upwelling of groundwater in the Speed River at Niska Road. This is a summer cool water refuge for fish, particularly brook trout. This section of the river and immediately downstream does not freeze in the winter. Downstream of the bridge does not freeze in the winter. Thus, this is what makes its designation as a provincially significant overwintering area for waterfowl and a federal waterfowl reserve. This may be at risk. The management plan cannot be considered complete until a sub-watershed study for this portion of the Speed River is completed. It is simply good planning. As far as I'm aware, there's no detailed groundwater monitoring completed for the Niska lands. In the Tier 3 source water protection mapping, the 8 hectares proposed as surplus is identified in the management plan's map 3.5 as having the highest level of recharge on the Niska lands. In the Tier 3 report, it's listed as having a significant risk of lowered recharge potential if developed. No runoff currently comes off these lands as it is all recharged. This recharge may support the groundwaters regime that supports the forest, the stream, the wetlands on the southwest side of Pioneer Trail along and support the assimilative capacity of the river for Guelph's wastewater discharge. And also, we need to establish a 4-season monitoring regime before proposed development. It is doubtful if this land is developed, that a stormwater ponds can replace the existing groundwater recharge. Another concern that needs further attention to detail is the Niska Road EA identified 6 provincially significant seeps that were identified on the north side of Niska in the wetland. What happened to them? They were not identified in the management plan. Did the rebuilding of Niska Road and channeling of the stormwater that flowed into the wetland area damage this area? No piezometers were ever installed, so no determination can be made without further study. The draft management plan fails to mention Heritage Guelph at their November 9th, 2015 meeting that they supported the designation of the Niska Cultural Heritage Landscape under Section 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act to protect the area as a heritage landscape. I found this omission to be surprising since the GRCA is designated a Canadian Heritage River, and this designation will be reviewed in 2024. The management plan must be revised to include a section on the protection of the identified cultural heritage landscape, which includes the viewshed. The GRCA has a $5 million Guelph Valley Land Reserve Fund. When was this fund first established, and what is its purpose? Was it used to purchase the land to be included in the Hanlon Creek Conservation Area? Could this fund be used for ecological restoration or to complete a Speed River subwatershed study? In order to protect the land from being lost to development, the entire 116 acres of the Niska lands should be incorporated into the Hanlon Creek Conservation Area as was originally recommended in the original master plan. Please implement this plan. Finally, I would like to comment on the lack of detail on how moving forward the GRCA and the city intend to steward the land in order to preserve its diversity for future generations. As mentioned by another commenter, there's been a significant deterioration of the city of Guelph forest abutting the Niska lands on the north side of the Hanlon Creek. It is simply not enough just to build a trail. Stewardship and education are the keys to providing ongoing protection of the diversity. The management plan leaves the important decision and recommendations to some future report. Why? Since the closure of the Waterfowl Park have been left for almost 10 years with no trespassing sign, which has largely been ignored by people with off-leash dogs, campers, and others. Damage has already been occurred. I have not been on the land since the no trespassing signs were posted, but I've heard from others about all the ad hoc trails and the destruction that has occurred. In conclusion, I respectfully request that the draft management plan should be received as incomplete and that a further revision is required before the final plan is brought back to the board for approval and further public comment. The Six Nations comments appear to support the need for further work on your plan. Thank you for your attention. Laura Murr.
All right, Laura, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. And as I've indicated before, we do have the item later in the agenda so we can deal with questions and comments at that time. So thank you very much for your presentations. And we will carry on now, moving along to item 9.1, presentations. Beth Brown has presentation on GRCA permitting and hearing process. Correct? Welcome. I'll turn the floor over to you.
Good morning. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll be providing information today on the GRCA's permitting and hearing process. The GRCA's permitting role is authorized, informed by, and outlined in legislation, policies, procedures, and guidelines. A key piece of legislation is the Conservation Authorities Act. Section 28 of the Act defines areas and activities that may be regulated, enables delegation of permit approval to staff, and provides the authority to appoint officers to enforce the Act and regulations. Sorry about that. Let's just go back. There we go. The implementation regulation in the Grand River watershed is Ontario Regulation 15006. The development, interference with wetlands, and alterations to shorelines and regulations watercourse regulation. That's quite a mouthful. It prohibits development and other activities in regulated areas unless a permit is granted. So what are the areas that are regulated by the GRCA? They include flooding hazards, floodplains, erosion hazards like steep slopes and valleys, inland lakes, water courses, including reservoirs, creeks, streams, and rivers, and wetlands and unstable soil and bedrock in the areas adjacent to these features, which we call the allowances. It also includes the Lake Erie shoreline consisting of lake flooding, shoreline erosion, dynamic beach, and allowances to those features. About 30% of the watershed is regulated. The GRCA has developed and maintains mapping of regulated areas which are available to the public through our website. However, Regulation 150.06 applies to all areas described by the regulation, whether they are mapped or not. And what requires a permit? This is outlined through legislation. So it includes development. I've listed some of the examples here, including construction, reconstruction, erection, placing of buildings or structures, changes to those buildings or structures that could alter its use, including increase in dwelling units, as well as an increase in size, such as an addition to an existing building or structure, and includes site grading or placement of fill. We also regulate alterations to water courses, as well as changing or interfering with the wetland. So all these would require permit, the prior issuance of one from the GRCA prior to the start of the development. So the permit process, well, it varies year to year. The GRCA processes a high volume of permits as seen on the stats on the right. Just see if I can move this down here. There we go. So I've just outlined for the last couple of years the number of permits that we've approved, and to date, the permits that we've approved to the end of June. Staff, as the first step, encourage early pre-consultation prior to the submission of a permit application to confirm whether a permit is required, to inform applicants of applicable policies and our submission requirements, including what information, plans, reports that we would be looking to support the application. Applicants are encouraged to apply and pay online. So this is a tool that was developed in-house where applicants can submit their application and plans online and pay with a credit card. So something that was very initiative and we're very thankful to have. Once submitted, staff will review the application to determine if it's a complete application. Once it's deemed complete, staff would undertake a review to determine if the proposal meets board approved policies to ensure that the development would not affect the control of flooding, erosion, dynamic beaches, pollution, or the conservation of land. Staff would work with the applicant or the agent to address any comments that arose from our review. Upon completion of review, there are three pathways for the application. One is staff could recommend approval. So this is where the application would meet the board approved policies. The permits are reviewed every 2 weeks. They're reviewed by supervisors, and the manager report is prepared for the CAO approval. We can support approval with or without conditions. The authority to grant the permission by the CAO is authorized in legislation and was approved by the board. The permits are typically valid for 2 years. And once approved by the CAO, we would issue the permit. A second pathway could be where the application doesn't meet policy, but staff recommend that the board consider its approval where there are special circumstances to be heard. So this could be where the application is not covered by an approved authority policy. So there's a gap in policy. If there are factors in addition to policy considerations which should be considered, or where the application is submitted and precedes a decision or a settlement of a legal hearing or a tribunal. So these applications would be presented to the general membership for consideration. And the third pathway is where staff are recommending refusal. So this would be where the application does not meet GRCA approved policies. In this case, Section 2812 of the Conservation Authorities Act requires that a hearing be held. In order to consider this refusal, the applicant is notified of the hearing and they are also can present before the general membership. Now, GRCA staff developed hearing guidelines, which I've just shown a picture of the front cover on the right, based on a template that was provided by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and Conservation Ontario and with legal advice. And as per GRCA bylaw, the general membership in the event of a hearing would form a tribunal for the purposes of hearing the presentations. The hearing is guided by the Statutory Powers and Procedures Act to ensure a fair hearing. Of note, a hearing is also required if the applicant doesn't agree with conditions that staff are recommending for the permit, or if the GRC is looking to cancel a permit. So for the hearing process, the chair would provide an introduction, followed by the presentations by staff and the applicant. Board members can ask questions of each speaker. There is a vote in open session, and the board members have to be present for the entirety of the hearing to vote. There is a letter of decision that is sent to the applicant, including reasons for the decision, and the applicant would have 30 days to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And at the Ontario Land Tribunal, they could either refuse the permit or grant it with or without conditions. So that was just a brief overview of our permitting and hearing process, and open to any questions. Happy to answer them.
All right, Beth, thanks for that. A little bit of insight into permits for folks. Anybody got any comments or questions on this? Okay, well,
Okay.
thank you very much. Appreciate it, Beth. So that was for information. So nothing. Okay, so moving right along to 10.1, it's correspondence. I have a motion, the correspondence from the Hamilton Conservation Authority regarding a motion to reverse changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and Ontario Wetland Valuation System be received as information. Can I get a mover for that? Moved by Brian, seconded by Gord. Any comments or questions? We saw some changes yesterday, so there's some movement on some of these things. If there's nothing, all in favor? That has been received. Thank you. Moving along to 12.A, Ontario Regulation 68721. And if you recall last time when we were working on these memorandums of understanding, we were having a pretty broad discussion about whether we would need an extension or not. Well, that's been answered for us because you can't get them anyway. So easy peasy. So when you're looking at that motion, there's 3 paragraphs there. The third paragraph is going to be removed since there is no extension. So the motion will now read that progress report number 6 be approved, circulated to all participating Grand River watershed municipalities, posted on the Grand River Conservation Authority website, and submitted to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry in accordance with Ontario Regulation 68721, and that the municipal memorandum of understanding and letter agreement for Category 2 programs and services be approved and circulated to participating municipalities. So can I get that motion moved as amended? Moved by John, second by Sean. Comments or questions? We're going to plug away as we're going to on this and get everything done as we need to, correct? All right. So so if there's nothing, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 12B, update on deliverables. I have a motion that report number GM 092366, update on regulatory deliverables, Ontario Regulation 68621 be received as information. Moved by Christine, seconded by Sue. Any comments? Oh, go ahead, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see, the province requested or mandated 6 regulatory deliverables. Some of them seem to be a little bit costly. Was there any funding at all from the province, or was this all to be covered internally?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was no additional funding provided by the province. That being said, the GRCA did set up a transition reserve prior to, I guess, the regulations coming into force. So we do have funds that we're using through that transition reserve to support the needs of developing those regulatory deliverables.
Okay,
David?
thank you. Yeah,
All right.
it's unfortunate.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Chris. My question relates to watershed-based resource management strategy. Earlier this week, I was at a Brant Waterways event, and there were several specialists there, one of whom used to work for the GRCA fisheries management. And they talked about the importance of groundwater and groundwater in particular to the health of the Grand River and its tributaries. And we're seeing concerns with, for example, Whiteman's Creek, that the reduced flow coming in from springs, all of which is sourced through groundwater, is jeopardizing Whiteman Creek's status as a cold water creek, which is rather critical. And there are other parts of the Grand River. We're actually in the main river, groundwater, spring water, if you want to call it that, coming into the river is a major source of water for the river. And in fact, it's a major factor in making the river between Paris and Brantford exceptional waters. So I'm wondering, in this watershed-based resource management strategy, if we're going to be looking at that, if there has to be attention paid to better management of the groundwater, in particular how it impacts the Grand River and its tributaries.
Oh, right. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The resource management strategy is a fairly high-level strategy that provides the rationale for our programs and services. So that would include the work that we do to monitor groundwater conditions and to better understand surface water, groundwater interactions and how they affect the watershed. So at a broad level, it will capture those programs. It's not at a level that would provide specific recommendations around particular areas in the watershed. So we do that through water management planning and sub-watershed planning where we have those plans.
Thank you. So my question and follow-up then is, if that overview confirms that it is a concern in terms of ensuring the health of our Grand River, is that going to be built into beyond simply an overview and building into some kind of plan or strategy to protect the groundwater, especially as it impacts the river?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, and we do have some plans and strategies that do aim to protect groundwater recharge and groundwater resources, particularly in Whiteman's Creek, through the Drinking Water Source Protection Program. That area has been identified as being of concern in terms of groundwater quantity.
All right, thank you. Anything further? So I will call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Moving along to banking and investment. Motion that the Grand River Conservation Authority approve the banking and investment policy dated September 22nd, 2023. Moved by Pam, seconded by Colleen. Any comments or questions on this? I thought you were asking a question, Sean. I see you're just resting on your chin. All right. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Cash and investment status. That report number GM 09-2369, cash investment status, August 2023, be received as information. Moved by Jerry, seconded by Jim. Gotcha. I'm kidding. You good to second that, Jim? Thank you. All right. Any comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Financial summary, that the financial summary for the period ending August 31st, 2023 be approved. Moved by John, seconded by Brian. Comments, questions on that item? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. So we're up to the Elera Quarry Grand River Conservation Membership Pass update. We have a presentation. Welcome, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So you might remember that at the June meeting, direction was provided to seek out some potential solutions that would operate operationalize membership holders to have some type of access to the Elora Quarry for 2024. So GRCA's accounting staff provided some financial analysis that showed there is some capacity on weekdays, with the most availability to be on weekday mornings, followed by weekday afternoons, and very limited availability on weekends. And this analysis aligned what the park operations staff felt anecdotally. So that was great. With this information in hand, we connected with our information systems and technology work group and park operations, and we met to address those technological considerations and how could membership users obtain a pass to enter the quarry because it's part of an online ticketing program, and still maintaining our overall capacity considerations that we have. So the midweek pilot project concept was discussed, which could maintain our online ticket sales, work with our current entrance scanning technology. And the pilot project, like I said, had to consider the community impacts, the capacity management, environmental stewardship that we were maintaining, maintain our operational gains that we've been working so hard to do over the past 5 years to help run the quarry in a better way. So with the pilot project, GRCA's conservation area membership holders would be able to reserve online a ticket up to 1 week ahead. The online ticketing system would ask the number of persons in a vehicle, and for all membership holders, there's a maximum of 6 allowed per vehicle. It requires license plate information and the membership number from your card, and whether or not parking would be required. If parking was required, there'd still be the additional $15 per day fee per time, and that can be purchased through the online ticketing program at that time. If a membership holder wanted to ride their bike or walk into the quarry, then there's no additional charge. It would be a trade out. Like I said, entrance to the quarry requires a ticket that can be scanned for all users. And so the membership holders would get a confirmation email and be provided their scan ticket so they could just show the scan when they came in like everybody else. And then the gate attendants would have a way to attract them and to be able to count how many people are coming in. So again, it's that maximum of 6 people per time. And the license plate number and the membership card would have to be verified at that time to make sure they line up. Sales to membership holders would be capped at 10 to 15% for each block of tickets in the morning session and the afternoon. And we would do a baseline of 10%. So that's most often it'd be a 10% guide for membership users, but we can view if there's capacity. And so if there is, we'll add some more in. So that would go up to about 15%. And our internally, our IT information services and technology department, they're working to modify our existing in-house software to add this membership cardholder part. And we expect to test that program in the new year. And to communicate the change to all of the membership holders, we're going to be posting it on our webpage as part of a pilot program. So we're not planning to alter our membership packages at this point. We're doing our communication through the website, and we'll be also putting that on the Quarry page. So on the membership page and on the Quarry site page. And just to confirm, the Quarry opens each year from early June until Labor Day. And we wanted to have an evaluation of the pilot program. How did it work? What can we do better? What can we change? So part of the evaluation will focus on impacts to the site, both capacity, the natural heritage aspects. It'll focus on any financial impacts, consideration of the resources, and how that impacts our whole conservation area program. We'll also be looking for some feedback from our community, or any feedback that we get will be considered for membership holders, for community stakeholders like our municipality, or the OPP. They often connect with us. So we'll consider that along with any operational insights from GRCA staff. So looks like we have a fairly good solution.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And thank you for hearing the board comments in June. I'm going to put the motion on the floor, and then we'll see what we've got for comments or questions. The report number GM 09-2362 Elora Quarry and Grand River Conservation Area membership pass update be received for information. Can I get a mover? Moved by Sean, seconded by Pam. comments and questions? Go ahead, John.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank staff for the way they reacted to the request from the board. I think it's a great solution and I appreciate the work you put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anything further? Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also wanted to thank staff and I'm trying to, I think I recall a lot of what occurred at the earlier meeting. I think this probably addresses most of the concerns the pass holders had, which was to gain a sort of percentage or proportion of the access. I assume this is done in consultation with some of those pass holders.
Actually, through you, Mr. Chair, we didn't consult pass holders. We wanted to make sure that we could manage the technology piece. That was one of our bigger holdbacks. So no, we haven't done a consultation, but we have heard from some members and membership holders that this is something that's desired.
Do you think it might be a good thing to do to advise them of, because they delegated to us, if I recall correctly, at the very least. So to just run it by them, get their comments before we make a final decision.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we actually sent Marty a copy of the report when it was posted to the website, and we have communicated back and forth. But I think in terms of the broader membership, there hasn't been consultation with the broader membership.
Right. So those who delegated, then they've been, I assume if they delegate, we would know their contact information.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a big wave on the other gallery. So I guess the answer is yes. Thanks.
Okay. I will call the question then. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for the flexibility there and accommodating that. Obviously, we're going to have some significant pressure points on our parks. I know that we've got David Townsend here from Rockwood Conservation today, and we've had many chats on highway backups and various things. So we're going to be under some pressure here to try to figure out some solutions as the popularity of these parks grow. Okay, moving right along to 12G, technical bulletin flood hazards. The motion is that report number GM 08-2363, ERO number 019-4706, technical bulletin flood hazards, data survey and mapping specification be received for information. Moved by Dan, seconded by Sue. Are there any comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Control structures. Motion that the Grand River Conservation Authority accept the proposal from Hatch Limited to carry out engineering consulting services to complete the water control structures asset management plan up to the amount of $197,240, excluding HST, and an overall project budget of $216,964 be approved for this project. Moved by Mike, seconded by Bruce. Comments or questions on this item? Go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to support this, but I do have a concern with their price. And I do know that they rank number one, but I do know that Stantec, and I'm not supporting any company, but they come in with a price of $143,000 and rank number two. And as a business person, I look at everything, and one of the things is the dollar. And I think I have a problem supporting this motion the way it is. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can provide a bit more information on the evaluation criteria and what the committee looked at. This asset management plan will be for our major dam infrastructure and flood control dikes, which we do have the utmost care and consideration for and how we manage them. Through the evaluation criteria that's included in the report, cost was a consideration, and we did rank all the proposals based on that amount. Through the proposals, the reason that Hatch did rank the highest was based on the project team, the understanding and approach. And we did find that there was some key differences in the amount of time being committed to some of the critical components, including the dam conditions assessment, that the Hatch proposal really demonstrated that they would be putting an appropriate level of effort and care and duty to assess the dams.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, Kevin.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Certainly often share with Brian concern about cost and making sure we're operating efficiently and using what in essence is taxpayer dollars very responsibly. However, as the mayor of a city that is particularly vulnerable to flooding and that the integrity of our dams and their strength and the condition they're in is critical to our own water supply in Brantford. And having heard the explanation, I'm satisfied that staff have made a recommendation that I can support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any further comments or questions on this item? I'm going to call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Current watershed conditions, that report number GM 09-2371. Current watershed conditions as of September 11, 2023 be received for information. Moved by Sue, seconded by John. Anybody want to know about the weather? David does. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not about the weather per se. In the last few reports of the current watershed conditions, it's mentioned repeatedly that the groundwater conditions were at an all-time lows in 2022. We've had a little more precipitation this year, so they have come up. But I was wondering, Mr. Chair, that I've got quite a few questions, such as what are the implications of this, low groundwater levels for irrigation, for development? How far back do the records go? What's causing it? What can we do about it? Anyways, I think these are questions maybe not suited for a board meeting, but I'm just wondering who at the staff level could we talk to if we wanted to go do a bit of a deep dive on that, because it is something that impacts where I live, our county, our municipality, and has, like you say, seems to have a lot of implications for what's going on around us. So who can I speak to maybe do a little bit deeper dive? And I appreciate, by the way, Mayor Kevin Davis bringing that up earlier in another question.
You guys are working like a team, you see. Do you want to comment, and then maybe we can take this offline and get David some more detail? Go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. The record at some of our monitoring wells goes back up to 20 years. So we've used that, looked at it on a percentile basis, as well as a spatial basis across the watershed, looking at the 25th to 75th percentile range as considered the normal, which is the USGS standard that they apply down there. So certainly we could do a deeper dive on the historic groundwater level range if that would be something that the board would be interested in. What we were seeing through July and August with the significant amounts of rainfall that we received was that we were getting more of these wells back into that normal 25th to 75th percentile range based on that 20-year record compared to what we were seeing in May and June. So we felt comfortable elevating the watershed out of that low water condition.
So David, it's Michael Penny, this gentleman here, if you want to reach out through Sam, and they can get you some more detail on that if you want to pursue this. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, to me, this is it's such an important item. So yeah, I'd appreciate that. So I will follow. Thank you.
Go sit by your phone. All right. So I'm going to. Is there anything further? I will call the question. All in favor? Thank you, and thank you for that answering that question. So we're getting now down to the Nisga'a Land Holdings Draft Management Plan. Do you want to come up? I'm not going to put it on. We'll do the presentation first, and I'll put it on the floor. Brian? So let's do the presentation, and I'll put it on the floor because then I'm going to forget what I've done. So go ahead. Floor is yours, sir.
Oh, thank you. Through you, Chair. Ron Gasparetto, Manager of Conservation Lands. Before I present this slideshow to you, I want to recognize Ron Wu Winter, who is the Supervisor of Natural Heritage, as well as Kevin Tottenham, who is the Natural Heritage Specialist, who have contributed greatly to this report. So thank you. And again, through the chair, I'll be providing you this slide presentation for information purposes only on the Niska Land Holdings and Draft Management Plan. As you've heard, there is a lot of history to this project. And so I'll provide you some background. The property is located at the confluence of Hanlon Creek and Speed River along the Niska Road. And it's on the west side of the city of Guelph and within the township of Puslinch. More particularly, it consists of 4 parcels, 3 in the city of Guelph and 1 in the township of Puslinch, with a total acreage of 160 acres. Now, to break that down a little further for you, we've got 117 acres of forest, 5 acres of marsh, 7.5 acres of meadow, and of course, the Hanlon Creek cold water stream. And we can't forget 31 acres of agricultural lands, shown as Ag Field A and B. As you can see, the property contains significant amount of provincially significant wetland, significant natural areas, as well as GRCA regulator areas. So pretty much the only area that's not contained within those designations is the Ag Field B on the south side of Niska Road. So a little property acquisition. The property was acquired for the former proposed Hespeler Road Reservoir project. And the first acquisition was in 1971 of 43 acres, with the remaining 116 acres purchased in 1977 from the Ontario Waterfowl Foundation. Sorry, I'm just going to have to catch up to my notes here. So this acquisition in 1971, a report titled Review of Planning for the Grand River Watershed recommended that the GRCA acquire the lands for the Hespeler Reservoir project. This recommendation was later removed from the flood control management system through the completion of the 1982 Grand River Management Study. More history. The Courtright Waterfowl Park operated from 1965 to 2005. And in 1977, the Niska Wildlife Foundation commenced operations and continued on until 2014. However, in 2005, the Courtright Waterfowl Park did close to the public. And in 2014, the GRCA terminated the lease and assumed full management of the property and initiated the cleanup. I will add that the cleanup consisted of removal of buildings, debris, yard waste, fencing, pens, animal shelters, and additional cleanup is still required, primarily fencing. All right, so getting into some of the official plan and OMB matters. In 2013, the city of Guelph received a notice of appeal about the redesignation of Ag Field B from open space to low density residential and medium density residential. On March 14th, 2018, the appeal was withdrawn due to an agreed minutes of settlement. And as a regard of those OMB minutes of settlement, one of the requirements resulted in an enhanced notification process regarding Ag Field B and the Niska Land Holdings Management Plan. In January of 2018, GRCA passed a motion directing staff to complete a management plan for the Niska Land Holdings. And things happen slowly sometimes, but on May 11th, in May of 2023, the draft management plan was released for the 45-day period. and public comments were presented, are being presented with the information report attached. We had a total of 17 individuals that had responded, and they had provided 25 responses. So there was a bit of a duplication on some of them. Okay, so getting into the recommendations. Recommendation number 1 is to engage with the City of Guelph and other third parties to explore opportunities to enter into maintenance agreements for parcels of land that can provide recreational or conservation opportunities. So there are suitable conditions at Niska for recreational maintenance agreements. We do have existing relationship with Guelph, and there are existing city recreational trails adjacent to the Niska lands. And as per the minute of settlement, if the management plan gets approved, a joint working group will be established and shall include members of the public to consider implementation of a trails system at Niska. Recommendation number 2 is to continue to advocate and promote partnership opportunities to manage and monitor biodiversity and ecological systems within Niska. As you saw on the previous slides, natural areas found at Niska, especially the Hanlon Creek and Speed River provincially significant wetlands, provide ecological values to the regional environment. These areas should be managed using best practices to conserve and/or enhance those ecological values. Future projects and research may be completed by GRCA staff and/or partnerships with cities, academic research groups, or private interest groups. And opportunities may include naturalization, plantings, invasive species control, and water temperature monitoring. And finally, recommendation number 3 is the disposition of the 8-hectare parcel of land south of Niska Road, identified as Ag Field B. Before we dispose of any property, the GRCA, the staff at GRCA routinely review land holdings to ensure that they align with the mandate of the GRCA, which is flood control, protection of people and property, and conservation and management of ecologically sensitive lands. And the lands in Ag Field B fall outside of these objectives and therefore may be considered for disposition. The Ag Field B lands do not contain any natural heritage or natural hazard features. Next steps is we incorporate feedback and recommendations from the GRC board, and we continue to follow the steps of the minutes of settlement, which is notice of meeting for consideration and a notice of meeting for consideration of approval for final management plan will be posted 30 days prior to GRCA board meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So there's my overview of that. I'm going to put the motion on the floor then, and then we'll get into questions if that's all right. I have a motion that report number GM 08-2358 Niska Land Holdings 2023 draft management plan be received as information. Moved by Brian, second by John. Now I will don't go away. I will open the floor for questions, please, or comments. Go ahead, John.
Mr. Chairman, my question of staff relates to the what would now be the Ontario Land Tribunal and minutes of settlement with respect to B. And I'm assuming that that plays into part of the picture to dispose of the lands.
Through the chair, that is correct. In the agreed upon statement of facts, the lands were purchased for the reservoir project, and that was signed and agreed to in the statement of facts.
And Mr. Chairman, my second question, last question, my assumption would be that if we didn't dispose of those lands, then there might be a legal issue.
Is that a question?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? Thank you.
Sorry, the minutes of settlement, which is now the land tribunal, which approved the sale of the land and their rezoning essentially. And if we didn't follow that with this recommendation, then we could find ourselves back before the land tribunal.
Through the chair, that is correct. Yes, we would ensure that we follow all of the requirements of that settlement, as well as the requirements of our own disposition procedures.
We've got some questions here, but I'm just going to ask, just for clarity here for folks, minutes of settlement and OMB, what these minutes of settlement mean, just overarching, and how they affect this process and how we are obliged to follow certain things. Would that be all right? Just give us a little, and then I'll go through the list of questions. Is that all right? Because it's an old term, and I think everybody needs to understand this has gone through a process, and here's the result of the process. And some of this is what we're bound to do. So let's just briefly, is that all right, Sam?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the minutes of settlement were again mentioned in the presentation, but a result of the applicant that was appealing the redesignation of just that 8-hectare parcel. Sorry, I forgot what I was going to say there, but anyway, that 8-hectare parcel was the subject of the appeal. And in order to settle or drop the appeal, the city of Guelph, the GRCA, and the appellant got into minutes of settlement. So the minutes of settlement are binding. These minutes of settlement applied to the greater land holdings that GRCA owns. So that's why you're seeing reference to the Nisga'a land holding, so the total 160 acres. And there's a very detailed process as well as steps of notification to the public that we have to provide and follow through. If we don't follow those, as Member Challoner mentioned, we could face legal challenge.
So it's like an old-fashioned OMB ruling. It's gone to the tribunal. Here's the minutes of settlement. This is what you need to do. Okay, so I'm going to go back to questions, and then, so Pam, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Both delegates asked for basically a delay until more things had been done. The first one asked for a delay, I think basically to examine the proper purposing of when we bought the land. So I get the impression that they disagree with what you said in terms of why it was bought. So I'd maybe want you to comment on that. And then the second one, and maybe the settlement thing makes it impossible, but they asked about the restoration of the agricultural land and our need for more parkland in the future. And maybe we don't have that option anymore, but anyway, could you comment?
So sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to tackle the first question. So in terms of the proponent that appealed the designation, it was Dr. Whiteley. The minutes of settlement are signed by Dr. Whiteley, the city of Guelph, and the GRCA. Informing those minutes of settlements, we did do agreed statement of facts, which all parties signed and agreed to, which stipulated the history of the acquisition that was used to form the management plan.
Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat the second question?
Well, sorry. The second delegate talked about restoration of the agricultural land to grassland and forest, and talked about the different needs of it, and that as the city of Guelph and the Grand River Conservation Authority need more parkland in the future. So that purpose, and she also talked about wanting to have a Speed River subwater study. Is all of that impossible now that we have, in light of the ruling by the OLT?
Through the chair, it certainly makes it more difficult. Typically, if we reforest a piece of property, it's not typically for trail use. So you kind of eliminate the recreational aspect of it if you're gonna, plant trees and forest it. But that's certainly something that we can take back and review to see if there are, program or forestry programs that we want to undertake on the ag field lands.
She also mentioned grassland, but
Mhm.
thank you.
Kevin?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ron. Ron, can you bring up that slide that shows Ag A and Ag B? The aerial shot. It's over there in the PowerPoints. I think it's the third or fourth slide. Yeah, there we are. So just to be clear, GRC owns both pieces of property, right?
Through the chair, that is correct.
Right. And these lands are presently used for farming purposes.
Through the chair, they've been farmed for approximately 70 years.
And what type of soil are they?
Through the chair, I don't have it. I couldn't even fathom a guess, but it's cash crops, corn, beans.
Okay. And what's the plan for Ag A?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Currently, there isn't a plan per se. We did, through the management plan, though, identify that those properties don't contain any regulated features as well.
Sure. And does the same person farm both A and B?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, they do.
All right. Is there any concerns about the runoff from these Ag A and Ag B, affecting the water courses? Like, is it controlled at all, the stormwater?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we haven't had any complaints. The topography, like that's sort of the top part of the tablelands, like it keeps continuing up. The lands do drain towards the Speed River.
Okay. And the present official plan designation on B, what is it?
So currently the Ag B is designated and zoned for residential.
It's also zoned for residential, right? And has the city of Guelph expressed any interest in acquiring these lands for whatever, like non-recreational, non-residential purposes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, not at this point. The conversations with the city of Guelph would be more to utilize the other lands for recreational purposes.
Okay, and B is about 8 hectares, right, or hectares, and that's what, about 20 acres?
And the city has gone out and rezoned it
Right.
for housing.
And what potentially is that land worth? Range.
Through the chair, I would rather have that discussion in camera, so as to not prejudice our position for future
Okay,
negotiations.
so they would have substantial value.
Yes,
Zoned, and there's potential servicing there.
yes.
Okay. What would that be done with the proceeds? Because they'd be substantial.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, these are lands that were purchased with Section 39 grants, so they would be applicable to submission to the Ministry of Natural Resources, and the minister would decide where to allocate the funds that come from that proceed. Options, there's several options that the minister can take, one of which is to put it in the land sale reserve, which is traditionally where all of our land sale proceeds are put.
Which we can then use to.
For five specific things.
Right.
Capital projects related to natural hazard, floodplain mapping, acquisition of other environmentally significant properties, I believe there's two other ones that are again related to studies for the management of our property and of natural hazards.
So my last question or comment, then potentially we could use those funds to better protect and preserve the watershed than simply holding a piece of agricultural land.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Right, thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Where'd he go? Rob, wherever you are?
Yes, I'm still here. So just to clarify, are we just receiving this or are we going to support a recommendation today?
It's receiving. So if one of the comments that you make,
Okay, so when are we going to support a recommendation, 1, 2, or 3? Next meeting?
well, no, when they've, so one of the things that he talked about in his slideshow was there's a bit of process. We need to take the feedback and the input from the board and put it together. So I'm not sure when you would be bringing that back.
Through the chair, we are looking at November
Okay.
of 2023.
Okay, yeah. No, I was just wondering, when they give 3 recommendations today, I don't know if we were premature, or like normally through our council, when we have recommendations, we support one of them that day. So no problem. I just wanted to understand the process here. So thank you.
Yeah, those are the management plan recommendations. They're not the recommendations to the board. The board will see an overall plan that they approve. This is no different than something going off to the planning staff for an application. It comes back to the board with the input from the planning staff. Council gives their feedback, public gives their feedback. They take it away, they bring it back. Then we have recommendations directly to the board. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Rob. Anybody else? Go ahead, Christine.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to be 100% clear with the question about the historical context. So I don't dispute the Hespeler Reservoir project, but I was just wondering, was it because of the minutes of settlement that we can't add on to the historical information about the Valley Lands project that occurred back in the 70s? Is that why we can't include that history?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the challenge is that there's certain parameters that the GRCA has to meet to dispose of lands that fall under Section 39. And so the original intent of the acquisition was for the Hespeler Reservoir. Like many of our properties, there could have been secondary intentions, programs, initiatives as well, but the primary project is the one that has to be satisfied and no longer standing in order to dispose of the land. So the reason why it's referenced as the Hespeler Reservoir is because that's the trigger that the GRCA is required to resolve in order to dispose of any property.
Okay, so thank you for that clarification. Also through you, Mr. Chair, I was just wondering, has the city of Guelph submitted any written comments regarding this draft plan as of yet?
Through you, Mr. Chair, they haven't submitted formal, but we've certainly been in extensive consultation with the city regarding the management plan. The city has an extensive interest in these lands for recreational purposes, and as well as I believe they're getting a high level of demand from their citizens in terms of making the connections through the city's property, through GRCA's property along the river as well.
Correct. So even part of the recommendation, you mentioned the trails. So has there been any conversation with the city staff about the old or the original master plan and the transition to the nature reserve? Or has it just been a conversation more about the trails?
Through the chair, yeah, it's just been a conversation about the trails, but we will, have those future conversations with the city.
Okay. And then my last question for you, Mr. Chair, has to do with the correspondence that we received from Dr. Whiteley. And it was about, in the past, in the 70s, the funding formula that was approved by Guelph City Council. And I was just wondering, it's one thing to have, when you look at the old minutes, the approval, However, was that actually implemented? Meaning, did the city of Guelph actually contribute to the 1971 purchase for the 43 acres and or the 1977 purchase of these lands?
Through the chair, I believe the cost breakdown was 60% City of Guelph. No? Oh, sorry, province. Sorry, 60% province, 30% City of Guelph, and 10% GRCA.
And would that cost sharing that you just gave me, was that for both the 1971 and 77 purchases?
I don't know. I can certainly get that information and provide that to you.
Okay. Thank you for your help. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Christine. Are there any further comments or questions? Again, so this will be coming back. This is just the report as we move this along in this process. So there's no other, go ahead, Kevin, or Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make some brief comments. I know this is going to come towards us again in November, so I'll make it brief. But first of all, thank you so much for your hard work. I know this is a long time coming after the OMB meeting of settlement. I do want to just point out there are a lot of opportunities for engagement further, and I just see this as a starting piece in the canvas for how we can engage with our city stakeholders. I'm also the representative for this particular area as well, so this piece of property holds near and dear to my heart. A lot of the memorandum of understanding already highlights what the facts are, and I think I respect a lot of my colleagues who are working and following this along in the grassroots level, but I do think we have to respect the process and also just abide by some of the meeting memorandum of understanding that has been put forward. I think we often like to focus on I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but we like to focus in on the acquisition piece to this whole discussion, but at the same time, the city has made it clear, the south parcel, it is going to be designated as low and medium density residential, and there's also a holding symbol. So it is subject to a rigorous process in the future if there is some kind of development to be had. But at the same time, the north parcel as well, just for everyone's understanding, it's designated as open space, and the city informally through staff conversations have expressed interest in some kind of recreational and passive use in the future. So there are a lot of opportunities. Guelph Hiking Club, GCAT, Trout Unlimited, they have an interest in rehabilitating the site. So I just would like for us as well to just focus in on what can be had in the future and how the city can work with GRCA. I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but these are some high-level comments that I have, and I do think there is a lot of opportunity, and I hope that we can kind of just focus in on that and also see as ourselves as board of directors how this acquisition process can positively impact us as well. So thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Ken. Yeah, I think it's important when the report comes back that there's a distinction between what may happen on a certain piece of property and what might not. I mean, if you're just looking at this from the outside, there might be impression the whole 166 acres is at risk for something or not. So we want to make sure that the intent around some of the discussions with the city, we're actually looking at trails here. You're looking at preserving, so we want to make sure that when you're looking at that holistically, here's what might happen here, but there, so we can break it into its component parts and work with the city on some recreational activities. So it needs to be clear in the report what's happening with the different components of the land. Mike, go ahead.
Thank you. I find this discussion very interesting. Hanlon Farm, I used to fish that when I was 4 years old. And I fished it for a number of years. We as Grand River Conservation must be very careful what we do there. That's one of the few naturally reproducing cold water speckled trout streams in this area. Okay, it's naturally reproducing. Now, again, we have to make sure the buffers are put in, that where that water doesn't get warmed up. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I've fished there as a 4 years old and fished there for many, many years. The Hanlon family were friends of ours because we farmed as well. Okay, and I considered it very fortunate as I grew up through my teenage years that I was able to go there and fish. And I fished there for years and years and years and years. So we have to be very, very protective of that cold water stream. Very, very protective. No matter what it takes, it must be protected. And we all understand development, but we have to put the natural buffers in so it doesn't get contaminated, doesn't get eroded. I mean, there's all kinds of places to build homes, but not at the expense of destroying a cold water speckled trout stream. Thank you.
Ken, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to add on to that as well. I know Trout Unlimited Canada has submitted some kind of comments to GRCA. I was wondering if there has been some kind of engagement with them following their correspondence.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct. Our natural heritage team has had conversations with Trouts Unlimited in regards to the Hanlon Creek.
Okay, are there any further comments? So we will look forward to this report coming back November potentially. So this is for information, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. So we've got a couple of quick closed items here. So I'm going to move that the general membership enter a closed meeting in accordance with the Municipal Act, Section 239 for the following purposes: proposed or pending acquisition or disposition. Moved by Gord, seconded by Sue. All in favor? We are going into closed. So we have two items on the agenda. First is a motion that the minutes of the previous closed session be approved and circulated. Moved by John, seconded by Ken. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And then the next is a proposed or pending acquisition, Township of Center Wellington, in order to further the objectives of the Grand River Conservation Authority by assisting member municipality and providing services. We propose that there's an easement as laid out in your package there, and it's on the website. It's a lot of technical numbers there. I'm not going to read that out unless somebody needs me to. You need me to read it out? Oh, okay. 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 Moved by Pam, seconded by Bruce. Any comments or questions on that easement? All in favor? That is carried. There we go. Next meeting is October 27th. Thank you all for coming. The meeting is adjourned. Enjoy the rest of the September weather. Motion to adjourn, Bruce and John. All in favor? We have adjourned. Thank you for coming. See you later.